Hi everybody, my 2014 college previews resume, Big 12 style. Team I have ranked 5th, tied for 5th in the league, Oklahoma State Cowboys. We're going to talk about OSU for a few minutes. Last season, 10 wins. Another terrific job for Mike Gundy, entering now year number 10 in Stillwater. Last season, of course, the big highlight was the rout over Baylor, in which at that time the Bears in mid-November was undefeated, ranked 4th in the country, and their quarterback Bryce Petty was in the Heisman Trophy conversation. But all that went up in a big puff of smoke. That Saturday night in Stillwater, OSU killed them. But if you ask a diehard Oklahoma State fan or anybody who really follows college football in general, they'll tell you that 2013 for Oklahoma State was missed opportunistic as well, because they lost at the end of the year to Oklahoma, and they lost early in the year somehow to West Virginia. Both games, OSU was a double-digit favorite to beat. Came up empty-handed. Still, 10-3 is nice, but OSU fans will tell you that could have been even nicer. Entering this year, maybe unlike previous seasons, the expectations I don't think are going to be as high for this team. Why? Because they lose 37 players from last year's squad. 37. 28 because they're seniors, 29 due to attrition. So entering this year, you do have very few players back from the 2013 edition. But a couple of players you have back at least from that team. One's a starter, and that is running back Desmond Roland, who, by the way, did not start until the midway mark of 2013. That's right, midway part of last year. The guy still gained over 800 yards anyway and had 13 touchdowns. Backing him up is Renee Childs. Childs, you might remember last season, as a freshman, saw some quality playing time and actually ran over a Texas Tech defender in Lubbock. I mean, made him look like a bowling pin, and Childs was still running. So both Roland and Childs, terrific runners who know what it's like to get low when they carry the ball and have defenders bounce off of them. The quarterback situation, J.W. Walsh, I'm going to say is number one guy. I haven't heard from Gundy who he's going to go with against Florida State. Walsh has started 8 times in his career, 4 last year, 4 the year before that, for his career, 2,900 yards through the air, 62% completion percentage, and he's accounted for 22 touchdowns. He can run the ball, and he's had a few 300-yard games and one 400-yard game. But at times, Walsh has shown inconsistency. Biggest issue I have with Walsh is I don't think he's got terrific arm strength. Now, the other 2 guys that they have on the roster in terms of the depth chart, right behind him, right now probably have better arm strength. They just don't have his experience. And I think that's why Walsh, for at least the time being, wouldn't surprise me if Walsh was the main guy against Florida State coming up this Saturday in Arlington. But Dax Garman, transferred from Arizona, he has real good arm strength. And another guy that I think you will be hearing about in the future is Mason Rudolph, freshman from the East Coast, who did come in a semester early for spring practices. Even though there was no spring game for Oklahoma State, they still had spring practices and spring drills. Of the 3 quarterbacks, Walsh, they say, probably has the edge. But if Walsh struggles, if there's an injury, you could very well see Garman, as long as he's healthy. Your goal as an OSU fan, if you can, try to get Rudolph redshirted unless absolutely necessary. The receivers, you're going to miss Josh Stewart. Even though nobody picked him in this last year's NFL draft and it was a risky move for him to leave early, Stewart did have a terrific career with Oklahoma State. You'll have Jawan Seals back. Jawan Seals now becomes the main guy for this receiving core, at least for the time being. And you also have back Marcellus Aitman, also Brandon Shepard, and look for also Austin Hayes to make an impact as well. But I'm telling you, the one guy who I think will make an impact for Oklahoma State is because he's got blazing speed, quickness, can hit the corner real fast. By the way, how fast is he? Big 12 indoor track meet this past year, won the indoor 200. He can run the 100 in under 11 seconds. Can't coach what he's got, speed and quickness. Tyreek Hill. You're going to hear an awful lot about him. They can line him up in the slot, outside. They can use him in various ways. Don't be surprised also if they use him out of the backfield too. Offensive line, you lose 3 full-time starters. 2 guys you have back, Daniel Koenig, the 3rd Koenig brother to play offensive line at Oklahoma State. I knew that last name sounded familiar. And then left guard in Chris Grisby. So you got those 2 back. And a guy that will play center that you didn't see last year because of injury but has played before, and that is Devin Davis. So if his health's fine, that right there is some additional experience that you bring back. But this offensive line will be the least experienced in a while that we've seen for Oklahoma State. The biggest loss, though, is not a player, in my opinion. It's Joe Wickline, their offensive line coach, so instrumental in those terrific offensive lines, which really coincide with the ground attacks that Oklahoma State has had over the years that have been so successful. You lose Wickline, he decides to take the same position at Texas. So that's a double whammy right there for the Cowboys. Defensively, Glenn Spencer did a good job last year as defensive coordinator, especially when it came to points allowed. Only 21 sacrifices per game, one of the best averages in football last year, and also they only gave up 140 yards on the ground per game. Top 35 in the country in that department. So to say that you're going to miss out on having Calvin Barnett and Tyler Johnson back, yeah, that's an understatement right there. Tackle-wise, I think they're going to be hurt a little bit because they're not as deep. James Castleman, though, does return at defensive tackle. He's a good one, but he's going to need help. The defensive ends, I think this is an area where they're not going to suffer as much because you return Jimmy Bean, one of their better defensive players, and also Sam Wren had a good game against Texas last year. Just one of his highlights last year for the Cowboys. The linebackers and the secondary, I think for Oklahoma State, these are going to be the areas where they're going to be the most challenged, okay? You lose 2 quality linebackers. You lost Caleb Levy and a 4-year starter in Sean Lewis. That really hurts. So you get Ryan Simmons back, though. Simmons played outside linebacker, did good things. 67 tackles a year ago, but I believe they're going to move him to the middle. Linebacking core would not have been as big of an issue if the following players I'm about to mention could have come back to play. Dominic Ramacher quit the team. The other 2 linebackers, Chris Catlin, who probably would have been a starter, as well as Denarius Antoine, both guys academically ineligible, okay, had academic issues. So Seth Jacobs, DeMarcus Sherrard could very well be the starters at linebacker for the Pokes. But remember this guy, too. He is a junior college All-American from 2013, and that is Devontae Everette. The guy ran a 4.540 this past year. Secondary, only 1 full-time starter back. That's Kevin Peterson. Last season had a couple of picks. But the thing about Peterson, he will not have Justin Gilbert as the other corner on the other side of the field. Gilbert, high first-round draft pick, All-American. So you lose him. Who will occupy the other corner? That could be Ashton Lampkin or it could be McTavius Jones. The safeties are both going to be new as well. But what will help Oklahoma State is earlier this year they found out that they will have a player with major college experience. Josh Furman played defensive backfield, also was a linebacker, the star position for Michigan. Okay, not star as in he was the star, but star as in linebacking position. That's another term for linebacker in that regard. Now, Furman saw quality playing time with the Wolverines. Furman looks like could very well fill a big need for Oklahoma State at a safety. Jordan Stearns, it looks like, will be the free safety while Furman occupies a strong, and Stearns is known as a big hitter. As far as the special teams, kicking-wise, they shouldn't be too shabby if Ben Grogan has a little more consistency. But remember, he was a freshman last year, 11 of 18 on kicks. 2 of the 7 misses were blocks. The punting unit, this area has to get better as far as coverage. They got burned last year against the Sooners in Bedlam, giving up a punt return for a touchdown. But also, too, the punt yardage was not all that great either. Kip Smith punted nearly 80 times a year ago, but even then, practice doesn't make perfect. His punting yards per punt, less than 40 yards. So there's improvement there. The schedule for Oklahoma State, obviously the opener in Arlington on national TV against the defending national champions, Florida State's going to be a loss unless you know something I don't know. If Oklahoma State could just get out of that game with as minimal of injuries as possible, that's going to be key. Oklahoma State's nearly an 18-point underdog in that opening game. This would have been a much better game if it had happened last year, in my opinion. But the next 2 games are going to be wins. Missouri State and Texas San Antonio, both in Stillwater. And you get 12 days to get ready for a nationally televised game on a Thursday night when you host Texas Tech for the Big 12 opener. Oklahoma State has had unbelievable success recently against the Red Raiders. And then the 4 games after that look like victories for Oklahoma State. Iowa State at Kansas. A little bit of a tricky game at TCU. You got to watch that. The last 2 years, TCU has come to your place, but first time in a while that you've had to play in Fort Worth. And you host West Virginia in what has to be a revenge game against Dana Holgerson's squad in late October. 5-0 start in Big 12 play, 7-1 start overall is possible for the Cowboys. But the last 4 games, 3 of them are on the road, and they're against the 4 best teams in the league. At Kansas State, you host Texas. Keep in mind, even though Oklahoma State, has not had problems in Austin winning, it's been at home against Stillwater, if you can believe that, against Texas. They haven't beaten the Longhorns in Stillwater since 1997. November 22nd, you go to Baylor against the defending Big 12 champion Bears, and then you get 2 weeks to prepare to go to Norman to face your hated rivals, the Oklahoma Sooners. That'll be December 6th. Best case scenario could be a 9-3 season if the young guys develop and develop fast. If Tyreek Hill has that big of an impact offensively, where defenses have to approach Oklahoma State differently, and if the quarterback play is better, that could be the biggest difference in the world. The QB plays better. Look for Oklahoma State to maybe get to 9 victories, okay? Trying to win at Kansas State will be tough, but not impossible, and we'll see how the game against Texas works out. Worst case scenario, 5-7. That is, if the injury bug looms, if the quarterback play is inconsistent, and if the defense misses those starters from last year that much, and it's obvious, 5-7 is not impossible. But likely I've got Oklahoma State qualifying for a bowl game. In fact, I've got them finishing 5-4, tied for 5th in league play, and 7-5 overall. I do think they'll start real well despite the Florida State game. I think that's a loss, but I think that they can very well win 7 in a row the way the schedule sets up. But I think those last 4 games are going to be extremely treacherous, especially with most of them being on the road. So 7-5 for Oklahoma State, 5-4 in league play, and a tie for 5th. That's my look at Oklahoma State. Another preview coming soon, everybody.